All right, so today I want to talk about AI and coding and how they go together. Okay, so a bunch of you have asked me, like in the comments, you've talked about ChatGPT, Claude, large language models, AI coding, all that stuff. And these questions come up in all different forms. Like, Dave, do you use LLMs when you code? Dave, what LLMs do you use when you code? What are your thoughts on AI? Do you think AI is going to replace jobs? All that stuff. So I just kind of want to, talk about today in a video. So I guess to jump in, first of all, when we talk about coding and AI, no, I don't use ChatGPT or Claude for coding or anything like that. I don't use Copilot or any sort of AI assistant. Frankly, I've just been doing it for a while on my own without it. I have no real reason to switch over. This might be different if I was a student today in this day and age, but I was a student 15 years ago, so those tools didn't exist. So no, I don't use them in my own coding, and I don't really think to reach for them. But the more I make content, the more I see people asking these questions and using it, and schools using it and stuff like that. So let's talk about it. So I guess the first big one is what happens when you generate code completely through ChatGPT. So I'm not talking about using an assistant or something that will give you the next couple of lines. I'm saying you give it a prompt, you give it a couple sentences, and it will spit out a whole boilerplate for you. That's pretty cool. It's neat that it can do that, but I will tell you, just from my own personal view, when I look at it, it looks like a hello world to me. I know you can iterate on it and you can do more, and I have to say, it is impressive, but it triggers the same thing in my brain as seeing like a hello world demonstration. What I mean by that is when someone shows off a new framework, like a JavaScript framework or a front-end framework, they're always like, okay, and here's how you do a hello world, or here's how you do the basic example in it. And that's great, and that's awesome, and every framework that comes out has that, but I don't care about that. Like, a hello world is great. I want to know, how do you iterate on this thing? When I have to make changes, when I have to work with it or fight against it, I want to know what that process looks like. Like, seeing the happy path is great, but I want to know what the war-torn path is. I want to know what this software is like when I use it in anger. Will it hold up? Will I be able to do what I want to do? But my point is, so when I'm looking at these, large language models, I'm looking at generating code specifically through them. It kind of looks like that to me. It looks like a hello world demonstration. That's how I see it. So now that we have my personal views out of the way, the question is, like, what happens when you use this? Will you stunt your ability to program? And I've thought about this. I've thought about this for a while, because my internal bias is yes. If you rely on AI to code for you, you might never learn how to use code. And of course, this reminds me of going to school and hearing that you can't use a calculator because in the real world, you won't have a calculator in your pocket. And, well, we do. I mean, I have my phone on me at all times, and I don't think people ever thought, like, you would have a calculator on you, but here we are. I have it on me, so what now? And I think the question that we don't ask is, okay, so we were wrong. You do have a calculator on you, but should you still use it? Are there enough reasons to still not use it when you're learning these tools? And like I said, my bias and the way I've thought about this, it tends towards, yes, we should stay away from using it when you are learning. So if you're learning to program, if you're new to it, and you're using these tools to generate code for you, that's cool. You get to see it and you get to have a working example, but you should learn how to do it yourself. You should learn how to problem solve and think through these issues so you can do it from your brain alone. Not because it's impressive to sit down and write boilerplate. Anyone can sit down and write boilerplate. In fact, using ChatGPT to generate boilerplate is kind of good. The fact that we have to do a lot of boilerplate says more about the current state of software than it does about software developers. But I think that if you are reliant on it, you're not exercising your brain enough. So when it comes to tackle more complex problems, you're not going to be able to. Like, without having the foundational understandings of a language, you're not going to be able to do the more complex things that a language might require. So I'm concerned. That's all I'm saying. If you're using it and you want to get better at programming, my advice would be to probably not use it or not rely on it as heavily as you are. The goal should be to be able to trust your brain and trust your ability to problem solve and come up with solutions for things. After you've solved a problem, like 100 times, yeah, okay, your 101st time, you want something to generate for you. Hey, I completely get it. But it's one of these things where if you don't know what the process looks like without an assistant, it's going to be very difficult for you to actually think of the right questions to ask. This sounds kind of strange, but when you ask an LLM to do something, I think one of the issues that I've noticed myself is it will do exactly what you tell it to do. So when you ask it a question that might be wrong, you might say, how do I use, square shape and fit it into a circle hole? It will do that. It will find a way to do that. You want something to actually step back and be like, hold on, maybe you shouldn't be doing this. Maybe you're thinking about this wrong. Maybe you're approaching it differently. I know as AI gets better and LLMs get better, they might be able to do this and detect common pitfalls. But the reason I bring this up is you need to be able to have hit these bugs to recognize them when you see them in the future. That's one of the best ways is through experience. The reason I can detect bugs before I even write them is because I've written them in the past. And I've written a lot of them. And just like the same way a machine learning algorithm does, that's how human learning works, is I've reinforced it and I've learned all that and I have all the battle scars. I'm not saying you have to suffer, but I'm saying that when you have experience, you can get better at doing it yourself without having to rely on outside tools, because it might stunt your growth mentally, and then you won't know how to tackle some of these problems. You won't know what data structures are correct, what algorithms to use, things like that. So that's what I worry about. The next thing, of course, I've already talked about this a little bit, is coding assistance. So something like I think was a Copilot is one of them, something where as you're typing, it will give you suggestions. Even without AI, these have already existed. I mean, we have language servers, we have autocomplete, we have things that can look up function names and declarations and even stub out structs for you, things that are kind of boring and tedious. I totally get that, but on a personal level, I don't really use them. I've gone back and forth with Rust and using the language server, so when I'm writing in Vim, I can see in real time, but even then I don't use it. I like to just write it out by hand and then cargo build it. And here's my thing. This is what I totally grapple with is, am I having the boomer take where I'm like, no, you shouldn't use these newfangled tools? Or am I onto something and I've actually stumbled across a really good way to get work done without outsourcing my brain to a large language model? And the answer is I truly don't know. I don't want to tell you to not use the calculator that you have on you. Like, I don't want to tell you to not use the tools that are available at your discretion. I just worry that they might stunt your growth mentally. And then when it comes time to handle complex and unique and novel problems, you won't have the confidence to do it without the tools. That's what I'm worried about. It'll be a crutch. It'll be something you have to bring with you. And maybe it's always available, but it might not be. So yeah, it's one of those things where I do get comments on a lot of my videos where some people say like, oh man, this guy has confidence in what he knows. It's like, I do, because I've stumbled through it. I've taken the time to learn it and I've written bugs. And I worry about people starting in tech now that don't go through that process, or maybe the process just looks different. So again, I don't have all the answers, but it is something that worries me. Another way of looking at it is, I was talking to someone and they brought up that maybe in schools we shouldn't even teach languages, but we should just, to start with, we should just teach pseudocode. So instead of starting with like, Python or Java, we'll just start with pseudocode. So just something to get you thinking in an if-then sort of mindset, and then you can learn these specific languages. And I'm against that. I'm completely against that. And the reason I'm against that is because start with a specific, and then with enough examples, you can build up the concepts in your brain. So this ties in, the analogy here is that ChatGPT is, or any sort of LLM is like using pseudocode. I know how to pseudocode and tell it to code, but it actually does the programming in the specific language that I need. The reason I say it's a problem is because if you start learning one language and then you learn a second language, you naturally build up the concept of pseudocode in your head by looking at them. You compare and you contrast. You look at the similarities and the differences between these two languages or multiple languages, and that is what your brain is super good at. The human brain is incredible at doing that, at comparing and contrasting data and then building up rules based on the examples you see. This is how all survival is done. And it's incredible. So when you outsource that to something else, you don't get those eureka moments. Your brain doesn't actually get to form those connections where it's like, I know language 1, I know language 2, and I can see the similarities and differences, and I can come up with a pseudocode that will work for both languages. You rob yourself of that, and I think that is detrimental in the long run. Again, I don't have any long run studies on this. No one has long-run studies on the effects of using AI in programming. I could be proven to be totally wrong, but looking at the trajectory of things and seeing the comments from younger people commenting on my videos, I'm worried about that. I'm worried that they don't have that fighting a bug for multiple hours to finally solve that bug and have that visceral, guttural reaction of, yes, I knocked this out. I understood it. I see what was wrong. I was confused before, but now I feel empowered. I worry that these LLMs don't actually make you feel empowered, or if they do, it's short-lived. And that's like my concern. Like getting an award that you didn't earn, the award just won't feel good. Yeah, you could use it to like get a job and you could, make ways there professionally, but I don't know if you're mentally going to feel great about that. That's just my concern. I don't really know how else to vocalize it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on AI and coding and whether you should be using it or not. The calculator one is really what I think of, because I was told, like I said, you won't always have a calculator on you. And then when we prove that we will have a calculator on us, does that mean it's still the right thing to do to use it? We always had an argument to not use the calculator. The argument was it's not always going to be there. But now that it's always there, should we still use it? We don't actually know the answer to that question yet. So in this example, maybe LLMs will always be there for you and you will always have this assistant by your side. But should you outsource that problem-solving part of your brain? Because the human brain is incredible at problem-solving. And there are things that I love outsourcing. I don't want to lift heavy things. A forklift will do it. I don't want to run 60 miles an hour. I'll get in a car. I'm totally fine with that. I'm not frightened that the forklift is stronger than I am or the car is faster than I am. That doesn't scare me. The same way that I don't think AI is scaring me. It's not that I'm a doomer on LLMs. I'm not afraid of that. It's that I worry that you're robbing your brain of the thing that it likes to do, which is problem solve. That's what I'm worried about. Because in a way, programming is like a creative outlet and the problem solving is a way that manifests. So those are my concerns with AI and programming. And yeah, hopefully that was useful. Let me know what you guys think.